according to researchers, the largest random sex survey ever conducted reported that only 1.4% of adults engaged in homosexual behavior. That was from 2003. Let's fast forward 20 years in Canada, because I'm coming from Canada, so we'll maintain with Canada's statistics. Right now, that same age bracket, late teens, early 20s, it's not 2% anymore. It's 22%.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Sister Veronica, to give you some background as to LifeSite's great interest here in Africa, it is because in Canada, in the United States, in Europe, where we normally are, the faith is lost. The family is lost, life is lost. And we need somewhere on earth for it still to exist, for the sake of our children, for the sake of the whole world. And the place where it exists today, most strongly, is here in Africa. It's been an incredible thing for me to come earlier this year to Africa and see the great faith here, see the strength of the church here, because it is the voices of our spiritual fathers, the bishops, that carry this truth forward and sustain it in the world. In many of our countries, we began down the slope to an anti-family stance in our governments because our bishops refused to speak. The situation is so strange, so unbelievable, but as soon as you head down this direction, this is where you get. I've got a chart here. It compares a study on homosexuality in Canada from 2003, and then I've compared it to 2023. And you might think this is impossible. I encourage you to go and look up the study. They're both on LifeSite. But according to researchers, the largest random sex survey ever conducted reported that only 1.4% of adults engaged in homosexual behavior. That was from 2003. So that you have, this is from the Canadian Community Survey, 121,300 adults. So it's a very good survey of many, many. And you get to basically 1.4%. And when they break it down, young Canadians in their late teens and 20s and 30s and so on, were about 2%. This is 2003. Let's fast forward 20 years in Canada, because I'm coming from Canada, so we'll maintain with Canada's statistics. Right now, that same age bracket, late teens, early 20s, it's not 2% anymore. It's 22%. And it's reflected in the United States as well. In the United States, they just did a study earlier this year. 1 in 4 high school students identify as one of the alphabet letters, LGBT, et cetera, et cetera. We are in an absolute crisis that is growing by the day, and the policies of the government have turned against the church, have turned against those who are at all faithful. So you have in the United States, the government, the FBI, the arm of government for policing has turned on innocent Catholics. There are Catholic families who are being sought after by the FBI, hunted down. Their homes are being come to with FBI agents, guns drawn, to confront them and their families. And it's not just one, it's several families. Why? Because they were pro-life activists. Not violent pro-life activists, just the kind that go outside the abortuaries and pray. And yet they're targeted by the Federal Bureau of Investigations in the United States under an administration by a guy who calls himself a Catholic. So that's the state of the war on life and family inside Canada, inside Europe, and the United States. And we've come here to show you how we lost this war in our countries so that the faith can have one place where it still stays, so that the life and family teachings of Jesus Christ can be maintained in one land, because there is no other. I will tell you our perspective on these issues. I want to go over what we're going to be talking about this evening. I've already talked about the startling increase in LGBT in America and Europe, especially in children. You know what's happening with children. Children from very young ages are being given irreversible treatments that will harm them forever because their parents deem them trans from the time they're 2 years old. And there's actual doctors and hospitals that are very well to do that suggest they will go and give these treatments. They're irreversible treatments, but they say, oh, it's no problem, it's holding on. It's not holding on to anything. And so we have that horror happening right now. We have men in women's change rooms. We have men in women's sports. We have men in women's prisons. You'd think a movement that calls itself feminist would have said, no, you can't do that. But no, the feminist movement has proved they were never for women by allowing and encouraging this insanity. We also have a continuation of abortion and contraception, but all of it actually comes back to the need for our bishops to speak out. And that was the first shoe that dropped in Canada, in America, and Europe. The bishops were silent. And that is the death knell to the movements for life and family. So I want to give you our perspective because what I've said is already quite startling with regard to where the society is at. But our perspective has always been a perspective of love. It's not about hatred and bigotry. Most of the West, most of these countries now point to Africa, they just want to kill the gays. And it's a complete, utter, total lie, but they say it anyway. They say it of all of the pro-life, pro-family activists in Canada and Europe as well. But our position has always been one of love. Because we love our brothers and sisters who are tempted into the sin of homosexuality enough to tell them, we love them enough to tell them, this behavior harms you, it harms your body, it harms your mind, and it harms your soul. And we're all Catholics and Christians, and we believe in an everlasting life, and you're threatening your eternal salvation. There's no way I want to see you not making heaven. So, even though they're going to call me a hater and a bigot, even though that they might come after me with the FBI, I'm willing and ready to speak for you because I love you. And then they might say, oh, come on, harming what? Well, the harms are very obvious. The harms, you look on LifeSiteNews, you can see all the studies of all the harms to the body that are here. We've got doctors here, medical doctors here who are able to speak to that as well. I want you to take the word of a Canadian homosexual activist. This guy's name was Jens Hellquist. He was a campaigner for the LGBT movement. In 2005, we got same-sex marriage in Canada, one of the first countries on earth to allow same-sex marriage. 4 years later, in 2009, Jens Hellquist went to the government begging for money for the homosexual community. And here's why he said he needed it. He said, and these are his words to government, and listen very carefully, because these words from this homosexual activist tell clearly the damage that homosexuality does to them. He said, we have one of the poorest health statuses in this country, and he's talking about the homosexual community. Health issues affecting queer Canadians, that's homosexual Canadians, include lower life expectancy than the average Canadian, suicide, higher rates of substance abuse, depression, inadequate access to care, and HIV/AIDS. He said, there are all kinds of health issues that are endemic to our community, only for that LGBT community. And he says, we have higher rates of anal cancer in the gay male community. Lesbians have higher rates of breast cancer. And these were his concluding words, asking for money from the government. He said, now that we can get married, remember, they got the marriage 4 years before that. Now that we can get married, everyone assumes that we don't have any issues anymore. A lot of the deaths that occur in our community are hidden. We don't see them. But those who are working on the front lines see them. And I'm tired of watching my community die. Even if you don't believe the studies, the doctors, and the testimonies, you must believe the testimony of this LGBT activist who laid out clearly the harm that this lifestyle causes. And therefore, those who fight for family, those who fight for life, love our brothers and sisters who are tempted into homosexuality much more than those who say, oh, go ahead, wonderful, ooh, hooray, hooray. That in the Bible is called hatred. Any parent who allows their children to do something that's going to kill them or harm them is not loving that child. We must love our brothers and sisters who are tempted to the sin of homosexuality that's endangering their bodies, their minds, and their souls. And we must be willing to sacrifice in order to love them enough to tell them that this is harmful. With that, I am going to pass over to the reason why LifeSite's in Africa in the first place. You see, we had a very great pro-life activist in Canada whose name was Dr. John Shea, and who I sat around a table like this with for many years. And he's a great supporter. He's now passed away. But he had a son who I didn't know until very recently. And his son was a supporter of LifeSite. He was a Canadian diplomat. He was then, after that, a businessman who was in China and all over the world, and then came to Africa. He's got a great heart for Africa. And he combined those two loves of Africa and LifeSite and approached us and said, I think we can do work in Africa with LifeSite. And so we've had a very happy relationship now for a while. And Greg Shea, a good friend of mine, and someone who I am honored to work with, will give us our introductions.
Thank you very much, John-Henry. And it's a real pleasure and honor to be here amongst such inspiring witnesses to Jesus Christ and his mission, which is to stand for dignity, for human dignity, and to love and to serve, and to be channels and instruments of peace in this world. It's really an honor. And all of you gathered here from different parts and different backgrounds, they're all complementary, part of a fabric of life and love of God. You've heard enough about me. I can say a few words about this gentleman over here too, which I found out in the last little while. He's a father of 8, and actually a father of 11, because unfortunately 3 of them were not able to come to full term. That's something, right? In Africa, that's not a big deal maybe, but... And he co-founded the LifeSiteNews 26 years ago, and it was based on a movement that my father had been involved in, as you mentioned, and many others. That was, it goes back actually 50 years, I think, right? The precursor, Campaign Life, yeah. So that's 5 decades of experience that we hopefully can share with you. And I also learned that not only did he attend the most famous choir school in Canada, St. Michael's Choir School, but he actually remembers it, because when we're at Mass, he sings so beautifully. And I'm sure that everyone's benefiting from that too. I think, though, that I would hand over to Tobias, who could then set the context for this, and then we can start with our speakers. We have a series of panelists here who, again, are drawn from different but complementary parts of the community. And so I'd ask Tobias, I think that's the plan, right? That you would have a chance to set the context for the TV viewers here.
Okay, thank you so much. Dear viewers, we are here at Strathmore School of Business. Capuchin TV, in collaboration with LifeSiteNews, is hosting the first ever Africa Live Forum, where professionals from all angles are seated here to give the green light on what's happening in the entire continent of Africa, the perspective of Kenya. just to introduce why this forum is hosted in Strathmore University School of Business, we all understand that the dynamics in the continent today have changed. Life, the culture, the family settings, and the dedicated faithfuls from different angles of the religious groups have also changed. And the Africa Life Forum aims to serve as a catalyst of dialogue from the different professionals here, a collaborational move, and an action to bring together individuals, communities, the youth, women, families from different contexts, the elderly as well, different organizations, institutions, and even governments to stand together and continue defending, protecting, and promoting the dignity of the family, life, and also faith. At this context, we look forward to achieve the following. 1, to continue bringing together professionals, media, stakeholders, especially members of the Christian faith, academicians from different institutions, researchers and activists, to be able to continue defending the faith in Africa, protect the culture of life, sovereignty of the continent, and the dignity of the region. Number 2, we look forward to facilitate the conversations and promote the understanding and respect for faith, cultural practices, and traditional family structures in the continent. Number 3, we also look forward to identify, analyze, and the unique challenges that the African continent is facing with regards to faith within communities at individual level and families across the region. Second last, we also look forward to discuss and explore opportunities for collaboration, empowerment, and positive development in the realms of faith, life, and family. And then lastly, we look forward to develop an actionable solution and strategies to address these challenges that the many faithfuls, both in the Catholic faith and other Christian religious denominations, communities, and families in the entire continent from south to the north, east, and west. So welcome, dear viewers. Enjoy. Ask questions by sending a text through the Capuchin TV contact or on YouTube. Those comments will be picked, and during the sessions, we'll be glad to share the responses. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you very much. So I suppose that the next step is to go to our first speaker. And I think we have a way of doing this in the West where we call it going around the horn. So maybe we can start with a speaker to my immediate left, who is a host in a way of this event, because you're with the Strathmore University. And I think it would be wonderful if we could hear from you. But first of all, I'll say a brief version of a very extensive CV, curriculum vitae. It's quite impressive. Raymond Matura is the director of the Center of Research of Organizations, Work, and Family, and assistant for the executive dean of Strathmore University Business School, which is our host today. And he is also the academic director of the Family Business Executive Program. So he's a very busy man. He is doing a PhD at Nelson Mandela University on digital innovation adoption framework for Kenyan family-owned micro, small, and medium enterprises. Very interesting, right? Applying technology to build the family from the grassroots up. He has a master's in applied philosophy and ethics from this university. The thesis is on, is the family a principle of the nation? Examined from an Aristotelian perspective. So there you go. He has a master's in IT from Australia, a postgraduate diploma in marriage and education and family from Catalonia, Spain. And where have you not studied? So, no, that's to come. That's to come. You're involved in technical working groups as well with the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, the technical working group for for the development of the draft national policy on family promotion and protection. This is the real work. But I saved the best for last. Raymond is the father of 4 lovely children. Congratulations. Thank you. Please.
Well, first is to welcome the LifeSite team here. We're very gracious to host this first African forum. And of course to also be part of the panel of distinguished people I've worked with in this journey on family. Senior Counsel Kanjama, Alice, representing her connections with Parliament, and very vocal pro-lifer, and other distinguished, and of course Dr. Wahome. We sit in the same committee in the Archdiocese. Yeah. So I think did you want me to make my remarks on?
Yeah. And then we would have time for 1 or 2 questions after each of the interventions. Huh?
Okay. Yeah. So I think this is very good. We started our journey on pro-life. I started as a young person in 1996-7 there, when we set up True Love Waits. And our idea was to try and set up True Love Waits clubs across schools. So my colleague David, he's now passed, David Odero, very passionate young man, introduced me to these ideas. And at that time, I thought it was very obvious to everyone that it would be good to remain chaste before marriage. But after a few years, I realized that there is a bit of a battle of people who don't agree to the obvious. Yeah. So, and I think that journey eventually took me to a number of things. One of them is to try and work at a policy level to try and understand what goes on from a policy perspective, the policy system that is sometimes coordinated, funded by other NGOs, coordinated through the UN system. Eventually, this comes through as laws in our country. So, and at that time, I met a Canadian, Anna Halfine, the founder of World Youth Alliance, in the 2000s. And she helps me to understand what goes on, the system, and how to coordinate things. And out of that, we've been working with the World Youth Alliance. At some point, I was sitting the World Youth Alliance board to try and see how we can work with the youth to get them to really talk about their real issues in their country, the real problems, as opposed to what is being proposed to them as the problems and as the solutions. So I'm very happy that, our connection and our work with World Youth Alliance it's gone through all the 5 continents now. And there's a very big World Youth Alliance group here. Then I got married in 2001 and got into family. Then again, I thought that people in family have all the tools and all the ideas on what they need to do. And then realized that even if we have a very rich African culture on very key things about family and the strength to, eventually be family people, the need for taking care of children, there were still challenges around getting, new knowledge on what to do. Yeah, so for a long time now, I've been involved with the International Federation for Family Development. It's another international NGO. And we have set up programs for marriage, parenting within our business school and within the ecosystem. At least for so far in Nairobi, we haven't managed to reach out to all the places out of Nairobi. Other than periodically, we've begun having engagements with schools to, engage them on what their parents need to do, what they need to do, what the school needs to do to promote this. But the climax of all the work has been the development of the national policy that we began in 2014, a journey that we have participated with many people in this room. And to tell you the truth, I actually never knew we will ever get here, because there are all sorts of things and all sorts of hurdles that we've gone through in trying to suggest something that is very obvious. Yeah, Constitution in Kenya clearly spells out in Article 45 that the family is a fundamental unit of society, and the state actually should protect that idea, and that there should be an enactment of laws and policies that support that idea. So I thought, again, that was very obvious, and that it will not take us 9 years to get a policy, pulled through. We've had back and forth. We've had it go to cabinet. It was returned. We have to fix this, fix the other, engage this, engage the other. But finally, this year on October 2nd, 2023, the National Policy on Family Promotion and Protection was approved by cabinet.
Amen.
So we kind of have a government node to implement many of the aspirations of the family that, again, are articulated very clearly in our constitution. We're not making it up. It's not some thing we cooked or the church cooked or anyone cooked. It's the people of Kenya. The people of Kenya voted for this constitution, and it was given a vote. People had to say yes or no to the constitution. And among the things that the majority of Kenyans said is that Article 45 is what we want. We want the family to be protected. So I'm looking forward to its implementation, and I'm hoping through the collaboration of the people here, by the way, the National Family Policy was a project of almost everyone. Because if you talk about the Hindus, they were there. If you talk about the Muslims, they were there. If you talk about the Protestants, they were there. If you talk about the Christians, they were there. If you talk about civil society, they were there. This document that has taken 9 years, 9 is always a special number. Yeah, it represents the Holy Spirit, the Trinity in a way. Mm-hmm. So it's a good number. What we've done for 9 years has been the work of all the Kenyans. And for those who may be doubting, this is the product of Kenyans. So I'm very glad, and I'm very happy to receive the support that you have from your countries on other ways to be able to promote life. Thank you very much.
We were originally thinking of doing a Q&A after each speaker, but I think in the interest of time, maybe I could ask the same question to each speaker. Knowing that we're here to compare notes and think about how to best defend and promote life and family in the Kenyan and African context, what do you see as the greatest challenge and perhaps, in addition, opportunity from your own experience to achieve that goal? So I'd ask you first.
Yeah. Okay. What is the greatest? I think there is a kind of a wave, and I don't know whether the wave is being promoted or propagated by technology. There's a kind of a wave that is attacking the obvious. And unfortunately, the young people, I don't know what has changed with the young people. They are ready to test anything else that is looking different. So I know I have spoken to many of the parents, and I tell them that, look, we have to be aware that one of our greatest threats in, parenting and marriage is this new animal called technology. Mm-hmm. And you see, when you look at it, as some of us who are in technology, it starts very, it's not very harmful. It doesn't look very harmful. But without putting one's energy into thinking about its repercussion, mm-hmm. One can find that actually any other extra time that they have there on some WhatsApp, it could be as it's not harmful to be in WhatsApp. Mm-hmm. But the habits that one can form out of being almost slaved to technology are beginning to be a big threat. Mm-hmm. So I think that is the biggest threat, to be aware that unlike the days we began in 2000, where sources of information were very clear, sources of information now are from all over, and they can spread like wildfire. In Kenya, we have a big social media following, and all thoughts and ideas, and the public opinion, unfortunately, these days can come out of the social media. So we kind of have to be aware of that. And then what are the opportunities? And the opportunities, thank God, where we are at, We have a big civil society. We have a good network of people who have been thinking the same, but not necessarily on the same faiths. Mm-hmm. I know, as I've said, in the working committee, in the family, I've sat with the Hindus, the Muslim, everyone. Mm-hmm. And within the church and within the development of a parenting manual that we did, I have sat with other people who have different products and ideas on what they have been doing in their churches. Mm-hmm. We kind of have a big network of people who are thinking together. Mm. And we are the majority. That's yeah. So the issue is to see how we can now implement some of these things that we have some of these tools we've come up with, the policy and these networks. So and we have a great opportunity.
Where technology is a friend and a foe, you have to work it correctly. Yeah. Okay.
Why don't you go on to all the other speakers and ask them the same question? I think that would be good, and then we'll continue that way.
Well, to your immediate left is our dear sister, Doctor. It's like in Germany, Herr Doctor, Doctor, Professor, so capable. Sister Dr. Veronica Rock, who is Senior Lecturer at Catholic University of East Africa, Center for Social Justice and Ethics. Sister is a moral theologian and an ethicist and a counselor, as well as a corresponding member of PAV in the Vatican, the Pontifical Academy for Life. Does that mean you're in that position for life? She writes and offers lectures and seminars on African Christian family and social issues. Dear sister.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank you, especially the LifeSite and all the panelists who are here, for this opportunity to give my side as a religious woman. Like the gospel, the Samaritan woman, when she met Jesus and she went back to her community. And after some time, the people said, "We don't believe because of what you told us, but we have experienced by ourselves." So in Africa, we want to thank the missionaries who came and brought the faith, introduced Jesus to us. And after some time, it was not easy for the African people to embrace either those who want to join priesthood, or if you wanted to be a sister, a brother, the idea was no. The reason was Africans believe that every person they have to marry and get children. So the idea of not marrying was kind of foreign, and unless for religious purposes, there was that idea. But now, the church in Africa has embraced Christianity. They have embraced the Catholic faith. And you find now many families, many churches, we have priests, sisters, brothers, and there is vocations, you could say there's boom of vocations in Africa. So that is the situation where we are. And it gives us now, as indigenous people from Africa, as Paul said, that Africa, to reach a time that Africans will evangelize themselves. And this is the position where we are. We are now getting back to our people to share the mission of Jesus Christ. And our role as religious persons is, apart from prayer, which we pray for the family, the society, the nation, and everything that is in the world, that is our life as religious persons. But it's also to share our charisms. We have different gifts from the Holy Spirit through different founders, foundresses of the congregations. And we take part to participate in the mission of the church. And in that mission of the church is really to teach about the dignity of the human person. And these also correspond to what African people believed. We believed in life, and we believe that every person has a dignity. When it's brought from the Jesus perspective, from the Christian perspective, it is something that our people easily appreciate, and it resonates with them, and they find home at that. So the dignity of the human person, the dignity of marriage and family, the place of marriage and family in society is something that is a place that is respected. It really holds everything. Family is at the center of life. So when we bring the gospel of Jesus Christ and teach them about the family, at what Jesus says, what the church teaches about marriage and family, our people understand, and really they find it easy to appreciate and accept the gospel. So our role as religious men and women and also priests is to teach. And we find our people, when we meet them, when we teach them when we teach catechisms, maybe in the parishes, we work in pastoral, also in education, institutions of learning in our schools. You find sisters, we take part. A number of schools in Kenya are run by the religious, and especially the sisters. And it gives us an opportunity to teach what the church says about family. And at the same time, being Africans, we are able to understand and know what does the church teach, what does the African people hold and value. And there are some of the things which may not agree. And we are able to tell the people in a way that they come to understand. But from the African perspective, some of the values or challenges, we can call challenges, which does not agree with the gospel, it was for them for life. It was like many people practice polygamy. It was not just the issue of having many wives, but because they wanted life. They wanted many children. In fact, you are respected and you are held in a certain standard when you have children, many children, and maybe even many wives, and you can control that family. So the issue of having 1, 2 children, African people will ask you, what's happening? Mm-hmm. You are supposed to have as many, my mother had 8. Mm-hmm. So, and that is very respectful. You had many children, and it brought joy to the family, and the children at their own place. It was riches. In fact, for African people, one is not counted rich because you have material. But if you have children, married and children, that's enough. You are rich. For my people, if you add cows, okay, then you are very rich. So the issue of really family and children was paramount and took a center stage. So when we meet our people, maybe in health institutions, and we talk to them about their health, about how to bring up the families, then they appreciate. But lecturing in the Catholic University of Eastern Africa and working at the Center for Social Justice and Ethics, where I teach Christian ethics. And the whole institution, all students take Christian ethics. So I meet all students taking law, economics, everything that they have. I meet them. And I find that there are a lot of challenges. There are emerging issues, values, which these students, and even lecturers, young one of them, they find through social media. And for them, it is cool. So through social media, they are introduced to some of the values which are contrary to our African values. And some of the emerging values is what you have shared, LGBTQ. And the position of the church, I understand, every person has a dignity. Whether you are LGBTQ or whatever, a human person is created in the image and the likeness of God. But the issue now is, what could Jesus do? LGBTQ. This is what we discuss with our students. Okay, this is what the practice we find now, and it has been introduced here now in Africa, contrary to our own beliefs. But what could Jesus do? Would he tell you to continue, okay, continue what you have, or he would challenge? And this is where the position where the students and as I go talking to giving seminars and workshops, this is the elephant in the room. This is the issue that we have to tackle, because all agree it is anti-life. If we continue this way, we are not even Africans. We don't have that vitality, the value of life, which we find in marriage between a man and a woman. And that is even why, even for African, you hear of what we call a woman marrying a woman. But it is not lesbian. It was, if a woman does not have children, she gets another woman like surrogate, so that this young one, and they get the one if she happens to have had a child, then she can give birth for this lady who did not have children. So a woman marrying a woman in Africa is not lesbian. It is for children. So that the family, there is arrangement, they do proper arrangement according to the African culture. There is a way they do so that this woman will not die without a child, but this other one will bring up children for her. So there are challenges which we meet as religious people, which we encounter in our families. And some of our families, they seem to have no problem, especially those who also go to social media and exposed. It's kind of, you are civilized, you have gone to America, you have gone, as you say, Canada. When you come back, you are like, I know things now. And they tend to introduce these to the families. But all of them, it is issues that we all need to stand and talk about. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you for addressing the point of the challenges as well. It's really welcome. Now, your lab, we have someone I've met before. Good to see you again, Dr. Dr. Rohome Ngari is, first of all, married, and in 1993, and is blessed with 3 children, and a daughter-in-law and 2 grandchildren, so you're well on your way. He has been a medical doctor since 1991, specializing in obstetrics, as they say, obstetrics and gynecology since the year 2000. He's the founding director of Mercy Health Services Limited, which owns the Mercy Medical Center. He is a director of the Kenyan Christian Professionals Forum, the chairman of its Governance Accountability Forum, and the immediate former convener of its Life Committee, chairman of the Kenyan Catholic Doctors Association, the commissioner of the Catholic Justice and Peace Department, member of the Family Board of the Diocese of Nairobi, and a member of the board of various private companies on their boards, mission hospitals, and NGOs. Passionate about Christian engagement, as a kingdom in all spheres of influence, especially healthcare, the family, and social economic spheres. Dr. Wahome.
Thank you very much. Asante sana. Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to be in this meeting and the coming together of minds. On the issue of the challenges, I've been in the pro-life movement for a bit now, and it gives you an opportunity to reflect. And what I've seen happen is that a solution, a problem is stated. Somebody outside of Africa states what Africa's problem is. Then it tells us how to solve the problem. And the initial one was we are not very well developed. We are struggling with development. And we were told the reason was overpopulation. And therefore the solution was to reduce population. And so there is always somebody who crafts a message and a solution around it. Now we have climate change, and the globe is warming. But what is the cause of the warming, and what solutions are being offered? Again, is something that we must look at and question. So I feel our greatest challenge is language. And I'll give some examples. For instance, the LGBTQ agenda that has been mentioned. From a medical point of view, if a person comes to my office and says he's a man who is trapped in a woman's body, then from a doctor's perspective, the first thing you realize is this person is not in touch with reality. He's actually delusional. And the idea then is to understand that this delusion is not the diagnosis, it is the manifestation. And therefore, what is it that could have made them feel the way they are feeling? Because it is not natural. And when that you explore, then you discover that there is issues of post-traumatic stress disorders. And the right thing for me to do as a medical doctor is then to refer that person to a counseling psychologist. It would be criminal for me and totally unethical to affirm that position and even suggest drugs or surgeries that would then affirm the delusion. And that is what we find that is lacking from the West. There isn't enough courage to stand for the truth. And I think it is time we as professionals said it is enough and we stop playing games. The other one is the question of abortion. And we spend a lot of time discussing abortion. Is abortion legal? Is abortion not legal? Is abortion ethical? Is abortion not ethical? Again, we have a problem of language. Because the term abortion on its own just means deliberately bring to an end prematurely. It's just an English word describing that you can end a process prematurely. So you can end a pregnancy prematurely, but does that mean you kill the baby deliberately? So in medical practice, when you terminate a pregnancy before the baby can survive outside of its mother's womb, that is called induced abortion. And induced abortion has always been unethical and criminal. So you remove the term induced, and now we are discussing abortion. And I think it is time we just clearly state that what is the intention of the service provider? If your intention is to deliberately kill the unborn child, then of course, whatever you're doing is unethical. Now, there is a very interesting thing that is happening, that you can legalize an immorality, and then in that bill, offer a solution for doctors, and it is called conscientious objection. Now, if you put conscientious objection in a bill, what you're first agreeing is that what you are asking people to do is immoral. There must be something wrong if the conscience will not agree with it. And if you allow me conscientious objection, then you are legalizing that which is immoral. And that in itself makes the discussion very awkward. So it is easier to say what you mean. We want to bring a pregnancy to an end to save the mother and the child. That we understand. And the method we are going to use will give the baby the best chance of survival. But if your intention is to deliberately kill the baby before it's born, whether it is a few weeks old, whether it's 9 months old, then that is medically unethical, and it is a position we should be able to sustain in discussion. Then the question of why would a woman seek an abortion? If in my profession we've seen women and the way they respond to the knowledge that they are carrying life, and it's a precious thing to see when a mother knows that she is pregnant, when she does a first scan and sees her baby for the first time. For a woman to turn around and actually hate that to a point where she demands that her baby is killed, you must all understand that it is not her who is a problem. She's the only one who knows she's pregnant, and she's the only one who can protect that baby. The question is, how do we respond when she tells us? And that's where the challenge comes. So the boyfriend says, I'm not interested. That wasn't the plan. The father of the girl says, you have let me down. You must leave the home. She goes to the pastor. The pastor says, you have embarrassed me. You now cannot come to the youth functions. And everybody in the community have told her they don't want her baby. And then when she turns around and terminates a pregnancy, we all point fingers and condemn her. So let us go back a little and say, when we teach our children about sexuality, what should we teach them? And I think one area that is lacking, that is in the theology of the body, is the spirituality of the sexual act. That if, as Christians, we don't believe in reincarnation, that every child who is conceived is a new soul that has been created by God that didn't exist before, then the act of coitus, the act of sexual relation, is basically an action of a man who is calling on God to make him a father. So the man is the high priest in this sacrifice. And his life-giving seed is the sacrifice that he gives. And the altar is the woman he has nominated. And when we teach this spirituality of the sexual act, I think it will start helping the boy child to reflect a little differently. And the example I give them is of a maize farmer who went to a very fertile piece of land during the rainy season and scattered some maize, then came back after a month and found the maize had grown. And he immediately started cursing the ground and saying, how could you grow maize? What is wrong with you? You know, this was not the plan. And I tell them that's how we sound when a woman tells us she's pregnant and we say we are shocked and we are surprised. So it is something to reflect on. So we need to address the act of sex from a spiritual perspective, to demonstrate why then it needs to be within the family. And then we say that if you're not ready to be a father or a mother, then you have a moral responsibility to avoid sexual intercourse. And that would help us deal with that. Then support the mother who is in crisis pregnancy so that she understands, despite where she may have fallen, that the baby is still welcome. And we shall do everything we can to be able to help her. So if you look at the opportunity, then the opportunity is about going back to support the family structure. That marriage is not just a union between the man and the woman, it involves the greater family. And when there are challenges within the family, then it becomes our business to support that family. Our greatest achievement has been the reproductive health policy. That is, again, a Kenyan government policy. It was initially instituted by the opposition in the hope of ingraining their habits into our population. But we managed to get involved and cleaned it up, and it is a very good document. And what they've done is go to court to try and stop its implementation. So we're hoping this government will help us to implement this together with the family policy so that we may be able to protect the sexuality of our people. Thank you very much.
Articulated. Now I turn to the other side of the table where we have Alice Matura. I'd ask the same question, maybe a bit of an introduction of your experience and your work in the area, and then addressing the idea of the greatest challenge that you see, and then the hopeful opportunity that is also there. Alice is the head of the Secretariat Catholic Members of Parliament Spiritual Support Initiative, and she's the coordinator as well at the International Catholic Legislators Network, ICLN, of the Africa chapter of that group. And also Alice is active in the Catholic Women's Association of the Archdiocese of Nairobi. So I'll pass this over to you, Alice.
Thank you, LifeSiteNews, and also the other panelists and our guest here. For me, working with Catholic politicians for the last 12 years has made me realize just the kind of potential we have if we have our own Christians and Catholics, especially in places of power and where they can influence policy. We have had many, many challenges, but I want to say that we have had wins because of having our own Catholics in these places of power. And of course, with the support that we've gotten, especially from the Christian professionals, and forming unity of people of faith. It's very, very difficult for politicians to work on their own because, particularly currently, the manipulation and the arm twisting from the globalists, from the radical feminist groups, and our fallback has been particularly the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops and the people of faith. And in Africa, especially in Kenya, I would confidently say that we can still, and we are still relying on the voice of the bishops because we look up to them, and when nobody is listening to us, the bishops speak from the pulpit and the world and the country listens. We have an incident and a big win that we had in 2019. We had the Health Reproductive Bill 2019, and by God's grace, we call it so. We won it because the bishops spoke from the pulpit, from the cathedral. Nobody was going to church, but all the Catholics were watching, and other Christians and other people of faith were watching what was happening at the Holy Family Basilica. Talking, what the politicians were talking, it was a heavy issue, and they had to withdraw it because of our collaboration with the bishops. However, we need to foster a stronger unity amongst all people of faith. We cannot win this battle as Catholics alone or just Christians alone. We have won battles in the past because the Muslims are with us, the Hindus are with us, the Protestants, the evangelicals. This is very, very important. And for the Catholic legislators, first, the Africans, on the issues we are speaking about, abortion, LGBTQI, in Africa, they were unheard of. And our politicians are first Africans, then they became Christians, they have a constitution to defend. And if they are equipped well with information, they will defend it and we shall win this war. And if we go back to the voice of our bishops, they are vocal, they are strong, and the Catholic bishops, I would say, are the single most respected voice of religious leaders in this country. But do they have enough information? Are we supporting them enough to be able to speak without contradicting themselves? We do not have reliable media that would cover what the bishops say as they would cover any other scandal, especially if it touches on the church. We need our own media, whether it's social media, where we can reach majority of Christians and even the non-Christians and the non-Catholics. Because for the respect that we have of our bishops, they become our fallback. For instance, right now we have a family protection bill. We are still going back to our bishops to tell them from the pulpit so that the blocked can be unlocked and we can floor of our parliament so that we pass it in the morning, or the politicians can pass it in the morning. We need to capitalize on this authority that is really, really respected by all peoples of faith, and even the non-believers respect the Catholic bishops. And when they speak, things move. And we also need the professionals to really give the bishops and the Catholic politicians a lot of support and a lot of information. We do not want to get where the West is, but without information, we shall get there. Without information on of LGBTQI and the reality that, like Dr. Home is saying, that a baby in a woman's womb is a preborn human being. So information we need, particularly to the West, then we need examples that we can learn from, where people are trying. In the US, they have more than 700 laws. They're trying to reverse what they did in the more than 50 years ago. Out of those, 70 have passed in the positive, but the damage is very, very difficult to repair. So the biggest challenge we have, one, is media coverage. The second is lack of information. The third is technology, because that is what is feeding our children. And we also need a lot of support for our politicians. And when we go for election, we keep saying, do we know the values and the virtues of the political leaders that we put in place? Because if they do not have values and virtues, they will go to the side of the globalists. If they have no Christian values, if they do not have African cultural values, we do not expect them to protect any of the values that we are propagating. Our Catholic MP Spiritual Support Initiative was initiated. The first idea came into our minds in 2008. And we found a reason to come together as Christian leaders. The first there was a pro-abortion bill in the April of 2008. We didn't go far because we were all denominations, Christian denominations together, until those that later became the founders of our Catholic MP Spiritual Support Initiative realized that we could do better if we started with a Catholic initiative. And we came together again in 2012, 2013, there was another attempt, 2014, there was an attempt, 2016, there was an attempt, 2019 was the peak of it because of the ICPD conference. And you see, because of that initiative, we are able to detect what is coming through the policy. We are able to collaborate with the Christian professionals and the church leaders, including non-Catholics and non-Muslims. So it is important that we have such groupings, particularly in the ministries. In parliament, we are there, but we cannot win alone. We can only win if we have collaboration with the professionals outside and the church leaders. So we need our own media. We have Capuchin here, we thank God, but we need even to employ and engage our youth to be on the social media, because the youth of this country do not even watch news. By the time news are being aired, they know what every media house will air because they have been on the social media throughout the day. So why don't we go to their playground and communicate there, because they are the targets of the globalists, the radical feminists, and those who want to destroy our families, and those who are propagating the culture of death. That is what I would have to say for now.
Very clear challenges and opportunities from your rich experience. And I will now turn to our advocate in the room. Charles Kanjama is an advocate at the High Court of Kenya, and he's a founding partner of Uma and Kanjama Advocates. He's practiced in many areas of law. The list has about 10 or 12 areas here. And also is a frequent contributor, writing extensively on many aspects of civil procedure, environmental law, comparative constitutional law, international institutions and property, including intellectual property, legal ethics and jurisprudence, authored digests on matrimonial property law, constitutional law, and tax law, and is a regular columnist in the Standard newspaper. Are there any areas of law that you're not comfortable with? Also, as a member of the Strathmore Education Trust, so there's an impact to Strathmore. Charles is a council member of the Law Society of Kenya and a convener of its Constitution, Implementation and Law Reform Committee. So we are very pleased to have you in our midst, and we would like to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much. I was a convener of the Constitutional Implementation Committee some years back when I was in the Law Society. Subsequently, I became the chair of the Nairobi branch of the Law Society. And around that time, we founded Kenya Christian Professionals Forum. So Kenya Christian Professionals Forum is an ecumenical organization. We have Catholics there. We have Protestants there. We have evangelicals there. So all Christian.
I meant to add that you're currently the chair, is that right, of the KCPA?
Yes. So all Christians are there. And we come from diverse professional groups. And what brought us together was in 2010, when Kenya was in the process of coming up with a new constitution, in a constitutional process of formulation of a new constitution. And the professionals felt that the church leaders would benefit from technical assistance from professionals, would assist in advising them on areas that are within our professional competence. Were involved in training of trainers, those who would go to the ground to talk to the people on the grassroots. So for the last 13 years, since 2010, we have come together, we've been engaging. We focus on areas of life, of family, and of faith. We also focus on good governance and values-based education. One of the things that we noted is that advocacy requires you to keep engaging and not giving up. And to recognize that advocacy doesn't mean that you have the most amount of money available. There's a lot of money that is coming from the West. There's a lot of strong lobby groups that are trying to convert the African culture into a mirror image of Western society. Early this year, we had a meeting in Entebbe, Uganda. And in that meeting, there were MPs from several countries in Africa. And we're discussing how can Africa protect its culture and its family values. And at the end of that meeting, we were happy to have a session with the president of Uganda. And when we spoke to him about what we had been doing, it was a courtesy call. He narrated for us that according to him, Africa has undergone 3 cycles of being dominated by the West. And he says the first was colonialism. That domination involved taking land and freedom of the people of Africa. And of course, apart from taking land and freedom, the Africans also got something in return, which we don't mind. We were happy we got certain things, including Christian religion came at the time. But we fought to get rid of the yoke of colonialism successfully. And then he said that the second wave was the wave of Neo-Colonialism, which involved certain international, you could call them unjust structures of trade and relationships, that while the African countries were free in theory, in practice they were still very dominated by Western trade and Western structures that had been put in place before. And we were sucked into the Cold War. The African countries tried to resist that and say we want to be part of the non-aligned movement. But nonetheless, we found ourselves quite dominated in that situation. And even some of our instabilities internal were occasionally fomented or supported by Western powers, like the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in Congo. These are things that have been studied. And then Museveni said that we have now the third wave domination, and this domination is an attempt at cultural domination, and it seems that those in some of the Western countries cannot sleep in peace until our African and moral cultural values are dismantled to the extent that they are different from theirs. The other day, I met a diplomat from the United States who was telling me that for America, the question of homosexual rights, because that's what they call them, is very important to them. And I reminded him that they become important when depending on whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans in power. And he told me, no, the American situation has really changed right now. And I told him that the difference in my view is that when the Democrats in power, they put so much effort in persuading the rest of the world to embrace their values. A big part of Western Europe is already quite liberal, like the Scandinavian countries. And it becomes difficult for us here to just operate the way we want to operate because of the pressure that is being put on us. It is now being brought even with international trade treaties and instruments. Like recently, the nations of Africa have been negotiating and have finished negotiating a treaty with the European Union that is the post-Cotonou agreement. This agreement, the European Union countries, they want to put their human rights language, which is basically supporting what they consider their values. And to us, those are anti-values, because it's an anti-value. It's against life, the issue of abortion. It is against the fundamental right to life. There are values of, supporting, they call them sexual minorities, but they are anti-values because they're against the family, which is a basic unit of society, and so on. So they put that language there, saying that even if you want to trade, you want to have access to trade opportunities, you must accept these rights that we accept in our countries. The European Court of Human Rights might have an opportunity to interpret whether an African country is violating the values of the European Union under this treaty. So we find when the Americans and the Europeans come together to push that agenda and ideology of theirs here, we are suffocating. And our presidents in Africa have repeated time and again. We respect other countries. We know you have different principles in the way you govern yourself. We accept several principles like rule of law, justice, equality. But we also have our values, and you need to respect our values. So that has been a key challenge here in Africa, that the Western nations are not ready to let us continue with our cultural and moral values. So for me, I think the biggest challenge or threat to our cultural and moral values in matters of life, in matters of family, even our respect for the faith, I think the biggest threat is a threat of ideas. It's a philosophical battle. The culture war has several elements, and I think the philosophical one is critical. In the West, the philosophical battle was lost during the time of the Wolfenden report in the United Kingdom in 1957, the Devlin Hart debate that we studied in law schools of 1960 to 62. They lost the battle at that time. In America, they lost the battle when they came up with the Supreme Court decisions overturning their rules against homosexual conduct, like Lawrence versus Texas in 1984. So they lost those battles. But what we have found out, those of us who are at the front lines, is that the arguments that were used in the 1950s and 60s in the United Kingdom, in Europe, in the 1970s and 80s in America, based on modern sociology, modern biology, medicine, those arguments that they used to foist these ideas that are anti-values on their people have now been proven false. The idea of John Stuart Mill, that what two people do in a bedroom by themselves doesn't affect anyone. As the statistics have been shown on the screen by John-Henry, that 1% has become 20%. It shows you what two people do in a bedroom by themselves. If the state doesn't get involved in the matter occasionally, can affect the whole country. In Kenya, in Africa, we have this saying about, or this analogy of an elephant, that it was raining quite heavily. There was a storm, and the elephant approached a man who was in a hut, and it knocked with its trunk on the door of the hut, and the man peeped from the window, and the elephant pleaded with the man that he just wanted to shelter its trunk from the rainstorm. And of course, the man, after thinking about it, he allowed the trunk of the elephant a bit of access. He opened the door a bit, it got a bit of access. And after a bit of time, the elephant said it also wanted to shelter its ears, because its ears were also suffering the beating of the thunderstorms and so on. And sooner than later, the head of the elephant was inside the hut. And the elephant also needed to shelter its legs.
Really hard.
It needed to...
In Florida is, as my mother would say, close to sinful. I mean, it's just terrible what they're doing.
It needed to shelter its legs, then its tail. And before the man knew it, the elephant was in the hut. But the hut could not both contain the elephant and the man who was sheltering in. So the man found himself thrown off his own hut through the window, and the elephant had taken possession of the hut. And I think what we have seen is that these philosophies come in a very attractive way. It won't hurt if you just allow me to shelter my trunk in there. Mm-hmm. And that is why in the battle, the pro-life battle, the question is, but a baby, not even a baby, they use the word zygote or fetus or embryo, with just a few cells, it doesn't even have ears. Are you going to say that you cannot terminate that one? Why don't you maybe put a barrier when you reach the second or third trimester, but you can allow before it gets a heartbeat. And the moment the trunk gets in, it's inevitable that you allow the whole elephant inside the hut. And so there is no apparent barrier to wage the pro-life battle the moment you concede that any unborn person in the womb does not have the right to life from conception. The moment you move the point from conception to any other place in the 9 months, you've lost the battle, because you've lost it at the philosophical level. You've lost it at the level of ideas. The rest is just practical implementation. And it seems the same thing in the area of family. The moment we depart from the reasoning of this famous English case called Shaw versus DPP. It was a 1962 decision of the House of Lords, that the state or society has a right to protect public morals from corruption. The moment you concede that, no, in fact, you should allow a bit of LGBT here and there, it is inevitable. It's you could call it the slippery slope argument, but we've seen the slippery slope. We've seen the people going down the slippery slope until they get into the water. So here in Africa, that threat of the West is first of all a battle of ideas. In the old days, we had taboos. We had even stigma. We had mechanisms within African culture to alienate or put on the sideline those who engaged in behavior that was harmful to the public good. But we're in an information age, like one of my panelists has said, in which it's not enough to just rely on feelings. We need to have scientific and evidence-based arguments for why these things are not going to work, why they are wrong. Finally, let me conclude by saying, as Kenya Christian Professionals Forum, we've started publishing a State of Life, Family and Faith report. We did our second edition this year because we said that we need to study what are the threats to life. Abortion is one, but there are others. What can we do about them? Are our interventions working? What is the state of the family, the African family? It is also wounded. It is suffering from quite a bit of bruising. And what is the state of faith? And we are convinced that if we battle at the level of philosophical ideas to ensure that we have the right values, and then also at the level of practice to ensure that people implementing the right ideas, because there's a lot of grassroots interference by people bringing in money to turn them into other lifestyles. Then we may be headed in the right direction. We may serve as a bulwark against those negative influences that are coming from the West, and then help the West to recover its soul. Because that soul came to us, a part of it through Christianity, through the West, but the West lost its soul. It needs to find its soul here in the soil of Africa.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Charles. And now I know where the expression, the elephant in the room, comes from. Inconvenient truths and such. Well, to conclude our go-around of the expert panel, we are delighted to have Mrs. Ann Kyoko with us. Ann is the director of Citizen Go. She's a Catholic pro-life activist. She's been active in organizing and supporting pro-life causes, including fundraising and network building. For the family, for life, for the embrace of that which should be obvious, but is becoming challenged increasingly. We have in our midst another warrior, and she's a very pretty warrior, and we thank her for being here today. Maybe I can, as a former diplomat, I was struck by also the fact that you have a master's in diplomacy at University of Nairobi, so maybe we can exchange notes on that as well. So over to you, Anne.
Maybe I can exchange notes. Thank you so much. Currently pursuing my master's degree. I'm almost finishing. My thesis was on the state of health in Africa, with that particular study in Kenya, with the case study of Kenya. So it has been quite an interesting study for me. I just published it, and the results are quite interesting because I realized there's a lot of money that comes to the health sector in Africa, in Kenya, and it all gets lost in other areas. The focus has been different. So maybe I can share my personal story. I joined the pro-life activism when I was a teenager, and this is after high school. My uncle shared with me that I was a crisis pregnancy myself. My mom had joined Christian vocation, and she got pregnant when she was 4 years down the line, and so it was really quite difficult for her. And I'll spare the details for later, but then it was quite difficult for my mom. So I learned this when I was just a teenager, when I was joining the University of Nairobi. And this story was quite personal for me. And once I joined the University of Nairobi, I realized there were several clubs, there were several societies, and there was a pro-life movement in the University of Nairobi, and I joined that one. But then the battles were just small, some NGOs sneaking leaflets under the rooms telling us to start using contraception. That is in the university. And so our battles were just saying, no, don't sneak these leaflets. We could go and collect those leaflets and throw them in the dustbin. Yeah, those small battles. But then once I finished my first degree, I joined the professional world, and I realized that there's a lot to be done and somebody has to do it. And I decided to join the pro-life battle. And I grew up in the village in Nyahururu, and this place has a lot that it needs. There are no roads, electricity. I just connected electricity for my parents recently, and water has fluorine. There's no water there's no tap waters, and women go very far to get health facilities, the hospitals. Once they get pregnant, they have to travel very far to get this kind of services. And I happened to travel to the United States when I was, I think sometimes in 2013. And once I traveled there, I realized that there was quite a lot that was happening there. There was a push for abortion, for LGBT, for comprehensive sexuality education. And once I returned here, I gained an interest. I started studying what is happening in different areas in the Kenyan society. And I realized that sometimes in 2017, an organization called UNESCO together with other NGOs, they had organized so that a curriculum called What Starts With Me. And this curriculum was teaching comprehensive sexuality education. And this curriculum was teaching abortion, sex as a right, LGBT issues, masturbation to 5 years old, and it had penetrated to 50 schools, and we had evidence of the list of the schools. So that was my first ever battle. And we had to do a petition to the Ministry of Education for this to be stopped. And then later we realized that there was an international organization that was pushing or actually advertising abortion as if they were advertising candy, as if they were advertising biscuits. You know, you just come have abortion, it's 5,000 shillings, that is $50. And we had to stop it. And right now we are in court. I won't speak much because my lawyer is here actually. We are in court because of that organization. And so we realized there is a concerted agenda, a very synchronized, very well planned agenda to turn Africa into what the West is right now. Population control being the top of the agenda. And the organizations that are doing this are the same. If you go to Kenya, like Alice said, there was a bill that had to do with SRHR, that is abortion rights, CSC, and LGBT. The same kind of a bill, the same content. We went to Malawi, we found the same kind of content. We went to Namibia, you will find the same kind of content. You went to the East African Legislative Assembly, it's the same kind of content. And who are the sponsors? The same people. IPAS, the Swedish government, the Canadian government, I'm sorry. The United States government, but when President Trump was there, it was a bit better. But whenever you have those Democrats, always money has to come for this agenda. So there's this very well organized agenda. There are these people, the players who are doing this day in, day out, and somebody has to stop them. So this has been my daily work to expose them and to educate people, because really, I think there was a study that was done by Kenya Christian Professionals Forum together with the Synovate research firm. And they found that 80% of Kenyans are against abortion. And over 88% of Kenyans are against homosexuality. So we are like, who are these people pushing this agenda for? When you go to the grassroots, they'll tell you they don't want abortion. Actually, like a sister said, children are a blessing to them. Why are we pushing for abortion? Who are we benefiting? You know, who are we benefiting when we push for LGBT agenda? Why are we sexualizing children? Who are we benefiting? Why not push for the priorities that Africans need? You know, and you will find that even when you go down to the grassroots in Africa, in the villages, they don't even know what LGBT stands for. But once you go to parliament, you'll find a member of parliament standing and saying, this is what Africa needs. But this member of parliament, not all of them, the compromised ones, the ones who have gone and sat down with these sponsors, the ones who have gone and been given money, the dirty money, the mammon, and they'll come to push for this agenda on us. And that's why maybe we have been able to win against this, like Ali said, in parliament. And besides parliament, there are those who are going to the ministries, you know, and they sit with the corrupt people, or maybe people who don't know actually what is in the language of this. You know, when you come to the ministry and you tell them, you know, we are pushing for SRHR, and they don't know what this is about. It's a very good language word. It's very good language. Euphemism is very much used when they are pushing for this agenda. They don't quite understand. So what we are doing is to expose the language that is being used by these people. What is CSC? What is SRHR? What is LGBT? What is this transgenderism we are pushing? And somehow we are gaining traction, and maybe sometimes we lose, but somebody has to do something. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, I think I'll hand it back to you. John-Henry.
On behalf of LifeSiteNews and our very many supporters, I want to thank Strathmore and you, Raymond, for allowing us to host here the first Africa Life Forum. I think it's beautiful to be able to see the fighters in this room, fighters for humanity, because in a very real way, you're the last man standing. And it's a great weight on your shoulders, but it's the weight of the cross of Christ. And we are here to do everything we can to support you in being that holder of Christ's truth for the whole wide world right now. And I hope and pray that, Charles, you are right, that the rest of the world will find their soul here in the African soil, so that we might go back to our own lands and once again teach the truths of Christ. This is the only way, not only to eternal salvation, which we all know it is, but it's also the only way to human flourishing. It's the only way to get to a place where life is valued and the family is what it really is, the building block of all society. So I want to thank you all for participating. I want to thank you all for watching. May God bless you. And as we always say at LifeSite, we'll see you next time. Hi, everyone. This is John-Henry Westen. We hope you enjoyed this program. To see more like it, be sure to hit the subscribe button below to get all the latest content from LifeSiteNews. Check the links in the description to read more and connect with us on social media so that you can stay up to date with all the latest life, family, faith, and freedom news. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.